The planet of Leora was a calm and orderly world. Its cities gleamed with smooth metallic towers, and the sky was filled with soft, colorful lights that came from their energy grids. The aliens who lived there had never known fear. Life was simple, structured, and safe. Every being knew their place, every task had its time, and every problem seemed solvable with careful thought and planning. Children learned the ways of their society from an early age, studying the stars, technology, and history. Adults worked diligently in their fields of science, governance, and art. Even the simplest creatures on Leora seemed to move in harmony with the rhythm of their society. It was a world that had perfected calm, and its people had grown proud of it. But peace can be fragile, even on the most orderly worlds. One day, the sensors that stretched across the planet, designed to monitor space for years in advance, began picking up something unusual. Tiny blips far beyond the edge of the known galaxy flickered on their screens. At first, scientists thought it was a technical glitch. They checked their instruments again and again, recalibrated sensors, and ran simulations. Yet the signals persisted. They were not random. Someone, was moving toward Leora. The aliens had never seen this type of energy pattern before. It was neither familiar nor predictable. The news spread quickly through the central command centers. Officials called urgent meetings where every leader in the city debated the meaning of these strange signals. Were they a friendly species seeking contact? Or were they invaders with destructive intentions? Every possibility seemed both terrifying and fascinating. The aliens prided themselves on intelligence and preparation, yet now they faced a question that no plan could answer. They could not guess who or what was coming. The thought made their stomachs tighten, even for those who had spent their lives handling crises calmly. Outside the meeting halls, ordinary citizens looked up at the sky with curiosity and unease. Children paused from their games, eyes wide, at the faint shimmer far away. Workers stepped out of their towers to stare at the heavens. No one could see the ships yet, only the disturbances in the stars, the strange twinkling lights that didn't belong to any known system. It felt as if the galaxy itself was sending a warning, a quiet tremor that something was about to change. In a society built on certainty, uncertainty became an unfamiliar and frightening companion. The scientists worked tirelessly, analyzing the signals from every angle. They discovered that the approaching vessels were moving faster than anything the aliens had ever built. The energy signature was powerful, almost alive, and it seemed to respond to the planet's own systems. The more they studied it, the more they realized that this was not a random encounter. The travelers were intelligent. They were observing, calculating, and perhaps preparing for something. The revelation filled the researchers with awe, but also with fear. They had never imagined that beings from another galaxy could reach their world, let alone in such a calculated manner. Rumors spread through the city faster than the news from the scientists. Some citizens whispered that these were the legendary Deathworlderse, creatures from stories older than any living memory, who were said to travel across the galaxy, testing and challenging civilizations. Others claimed they were explorers, perhaps curious traders or scholars who had wandered too far from their home worlds. The alien leaders could not confirm anything. All they knew was that the arrival of these unknown beings might disrupt everything they had built. Some feared total destruction, others feared the loss of control over their lives. Yet a few, secretly, hoped for the chance to learn from these outsiders, to see what other forms of intelligence might exist in the galaxy. Night came, and still no ships were visible, yet the tension in the city did not fade. Families gathered in their homes, speaking quietly about what might happen. In schools, teachers told students to focus on their lessons, but even the youngest could feel the unease in the air. The normally predictable life of the planet was being interrupted by the unknown. The elders of Leora, who had lived through many technological advancements and minor crises, admitted in private that this was unlike anything they had faced before. They had planned for storms, for energy failures, even for small invasions, but never for a civilization arriving from a galaxy far away. As days passed, the signals grew stronger, clearer, and more deliberate. The aliens noticed that the approaching vessels seemed to communicate with each other through pulses of energy, almost like a heartbeat. It was not human speech, nor was it the language of any alien culture known to Leora. It was something new, something that demanded attention and respect. Some scientists suggested sending probes, but the leaders hesitated. They did not want to provoke the newcomers. They did not want to make the first move until they understood whether the visitors were friendly or dangerous. The first small craft appeared at the edge of the planet's orbit, just as the sun rose over the eastern mountains. They were unlike anything the aliens had ever imagined. Dark, angular, and enormous, the ships moved silently, their surfaces shimmering with strange energy that seemed alive. Citizens gasped when they saw the shapes in the sky. Some ran to higher ground for a better view. Others stayed inside, afraid to witness what they could not understand. Even the bravest soldiers and explorers felt a shiver of fear as they watched the silent, hovering vessels. For the first time in generations, the people of Leora felt powerless. Their tools, their knowledge, their technology, it all seemed insignificant in the presence of the unknown. Leaders tried to maintain calm, issuing statements to the public, urging patience and caution. Yet in their private discussions, they admitted that they had no plan to deal with such visitors. Every precaution they had ever prepared was based on past experience, and this was completely outside of their experience. It was a test, though they did not know what was being tested. And so the planet waited. Every citizen, every scientist, and every leader watched the sky, wondering what would happen next. The aliens realized that their lives, as orderly and predictable as they had always been, were about to change forever. For the first time, they understood the fragility of their calm, the delicate balance of safety they had always taken for granted. Something was coming, something powerful, strange, and unknown, and no one could say who would come or what would happen when they arrived. The quiet anticipation filled the planet with tension and wonder. In their hearts, every being knew that their world was standing at the edge of a new chapter, and nothing would ever be the same again. The strange ships stayed at the edge of Leora's orbit, hovering silently like shadows against the glowing planet below. Their presence created a mixture of fear and fascination among the aliens. People stopped their daily routines to watch, the skies pointing out the mysterious shapes to neighbors, children, and friends. Scientists examined every detail of the ships, their instruments running constantly, trying to understand what made them so different. The hulls were dark, but not dull. They seemed to shimmer as if alive, reacting to the planet's energy fields. No alien design had ever looked like this, and no known material could explain their structure. Even the most experienced engineers and physicists were stunned. The alien leaders debated endlessly. They held meetings in the tallest towers where the entire council of Leora's government gathered. Some insisted that these ships were a threat and must be destroyed before they reached the surface. Others argued for caution, suggesting that Leora should try to communicate, to learn the intentions of these unknown visitors. The room was filled with tension. Every voice was serious. Every suggestion weighed with the knowledge that a wrong decision could endanger the entire planet. Outside, the citizens could sense the anxiety, even though the leaders tried to maintain calm through public messages. The sensors showed that the ships were moving slowly but deliberately, almost as if they were exploring, mapping the planet from afar. The energy patterns they emitted were unlike anything the aliens had ever seen. Pulses of light traveled through space in irregular sequences, vibrating with a rhythm that suggested intelligence. The scientists worked in shifts, analyzing data around the clock. They compared the patterns with historical records of other civilizations, but nothing matched. Each discovery only raised more questions. How were these ships so fast, yet so silent? How could their energy signature be so strong and yet so precise? The more the scientists learned, the clearer it became that the visitors were far beyond anything Leora had experienced. Rumors spread quickly through the population. Stories from ancient texts described legendary visitors called Deathworlderse, beings from the farthest reaches of the galaxy. According to the old legends, these visitors were strong, resilient, and unpredictable. They traveled across galaxies, testing worlds and civilizations in ways that no one fully understood. Some claimed they were conquerors, while others believed they were explorers who simply wanted to observe. The elders warned that these beings were not like the peaceful travelers the aliens had imagined. Even in simple stories told to children, the Deathworlders were both feared and admired for their skill and power. As the ships approached, people began to feel a strange combination of awe and fear. Children stopped playing and pointed at the sky, whispering to each other. Adults paused their work, feeling a strange chill despite the warmth of the sun. Even the soldiers, trained for emergencies, felt a nervous tension they could not explain. The presence of these visitors disrupted the calm, orderly rhythm of life on Leora. Families gathered in homes and towers, watching through windows and hollow screens, wondering what was about to happen. Nobody had ever imagined that a civilization could arrive at their doorstep without warning, without invitation, and without explanation. The first small tendrils of communication came from the ships. Pulses of energy shot toward the planet, forming patterns and sequences. The aliens tried to respond, sending their own signals. But the visitors did not seem to understand or react in any familiar way. For days, the communication attempts continued. Scientists designed new codes, symbols, and patterns, trying to find a way to reach the visitors. Every night, the sky lit up with streams of energy, some from the aliens, some from the ships. The exchanges were silent yet full of tension, like a conversation where both sides were unsure of the other's language. Amid this uncertainty, fear grew among the citizens. Markets slowed down, schools closed early, and streets were quieter than usual. The ordinary routines that once gave life stability now seemed meaningless in the shadow of the unknown. Some people fled to remote areas of the planet, hoping to escape whatever might come. Others stayed in the cities, determined to face the newcomers with courage. News channels broadcast constant updates, often repeating the same images of the hovering ships. But every observer noticed new details each time: glimmers of light, movement along the hulls, shifts in energy patterns. The citizens could not look away, even if they wanted to. The alien scientists began to notice something even more unsettling. The ships seemed to have a rhythm, a purpose, as if they were scanning not only the surface of the planet, but also its life forms. The energy pulses adjusted when new buildings were constructed, when large gatherings of aliens formed, or when vehicles moved across the cities. It became clear that the visitors were studying the planet carefully, learning about its structures, inhabitants, and patterns of behavior. Some of the more cautious scientists feared that this was preparation for invasion, but others thought it was merely observation, a scientific curiosity unlike anything Leora had ever experienced. Despite the tension, moments of fascination appeared. Artists and students sketched the ships, trying to capture their strange beauty. Philosophers and historians debated the meaning of their arrival, discussing how the encounter could change Leora forever. Even the children, while scared, whispered stories about heroes meeting the visitors and imagined friendships with beings from distant stars. In a way, the unknown brought the entire planet together, as people focused on a shared experience that none of them could fully control or predict. As days turned into a week, the ships drew closer. Now, the citizens could make out more details: sharp edges on the hulls, strange lights that seemed almost alive, and movements that suggested an intelligence guiding every motion. The aliens began preparing their defense forces just in case, constructing monitoring stations, strengthening shields, and training specialized teams to respond. But even these preparations seemed inadequate in the face of the unknown. The ships were not like any threat they had encountered. They were faster, stronger, and smarter than anything the alien society had ever faced. The reality that these visitors were not ordinary forces but potentially legendary Deathworlders began to sink into everyone's minds. The tension reached a peak when a massive shadow fell over the central city as the ships aligned closer to the planet. Citizens looked up in silence, holding their breath, unsure whether to feel fear, awe, or hope. No one moved at first. The air itself seemed heavy with anticipation. The scientists monitored every pulse, every energy flicker, trying to interpret the intentions of the visitors. The leaders gave careful instructions to stay calm, but inside, they knew that this moment could change the history of Leora forever. Every eye watched the sky, every mind raced with possibilities, and every heart felt the strange electric mixture of fear and wonder that comes only when the unknown finally arrives. At last, the ships made their first deliberate move. After hovering at the edge of Leora's orbit for days, they descended closer to the planet's surface. The citizens watched in awe as enormous dark hulls moved gracefully through the sky, casting long, strange shadows across the cities below. The shadows were heavy, almost tangible, and a hush fell over the people. Even the most adventurous children stopped their play, eyes wide, as if the sky itself had changed. The leaders of Leora gathered in emergency councils, unsure of what the next move of these mysterious visitors would be. Every suggestion they made was careful, deliberate, and cautious. Nobody wanted to make a mistake that could provoke an unknown civilization. The first signs of interaction appeared in small, subtle ways. The visitors, who were quickly identified by some scientists as likely Deathworlderse, sent pulses of energy toward the planet that resembled a pattern of observation. It was neither threatening nor friendly, just deliberate. Sensors picked up that the pulses responded to the aliens' own movements. When a transport flew across a city, the pulses shifted. When large groups of citizens gathered in the central squares, the pulses changed rhythm. The aliens realized that these beings were not only intelligent, but highly perceptive. They were studying every detail of Leora's society, from its technology to its people. The leaders decided it was time for cautious engagement. They selected a small team of diplomats and scientists to approach the situation. The team assembled in a high observation tower, overlooking the landing zone where the Deathworlderse ship seemed to be descending. They prepared communication devices, energy symbols, and gesture-based messages, hoping to establish contact. Every member of the team felt a mixture of excitement and fear. They had studied communication theory, alien linguistics, and interstellar behavior, but nothing could have fully prepared them for this moment. The visitors were unlike any known species. When the first group of Deathworlderse landed, they moved with precision and silence. Their appearance was intimidating. Tall, strong, with dark reflective surfaces on their suits that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. Yet they did not display aggression. Instead, they moved carefully, examining their surroundings, scanning buildings, streets, and people. The aliens watched closely, noting how the visitors interacted with the environment. Every step seemed deliberate, purposeful, and careful. There was no panic, no rush, and no display of force. The Deathworlderse seemed to be studying, not attacking. The initial attempts at communication were cautious. The aliens projected symbols, sequences of lights, and even sound vibrations toward the visitors, hoping to elicit a response. At first, there was silence. Then, the Deathworlderse emitted subtle pulses of energy, responding in a rhythm that suggested acknowledgement. The scientists analyzed these pulses, noting patterns that hinted at intelligence and intention. It became clear that the visitors understood the attempt at communication, but were responding in a way that the aliens had never encountered before. Every signal seemed to contain layers of information, challenging the aliens' understanding of language and meaning. The citizens of Leora observed the interaction from their towers and streets. Crowds gathered quietly, whispering and speculating. Some believed that the visitors were testing them, evaluating their reactions. Others hoped that the Deathworlderse had come in peace, curious about the alien civilization rather than seeking to destroy it. The mixture of fear and fascination was palpable. Schools held special lessons to explain what was happening, not only to inform children but also to help them manage the anxiety of facing an unknown force. Even artists and writers felt inspired, sketching and writing about the visitors and imagining what their arrival could mean for the future of the planet. Over several days, small groups of Deathworlderse approached designated diplomats. The initial encounters were tense, with both sides unsure how to act. The visitors did not speak in any recognizable language, nor did they display any familiar gestures. They observed, tilted their heads as if analyzing, and sometimes sent subtle energy pulses toward the diplomats. The aliens realized that these beings were intelligent, but their methods of interaction were entirely foreign. They had to think differently, adapt quickly, and find new ways to communicate beyond words or gestures. The diplomats and scientists experimented with a variety of methods. They used light sequences, tactile signals, and even small robotic probes to send messages. Gradually, they discovered that the visitors responded more reliably to energy patterns than to visual or auditory cues. By adjusting the sequence and rhythm of their pulses, the aliens could convey simple ideas such as, "We are peaceful," or "We wish to understand." The Deathworlders responded with their own sequences, indicating acknowledgement, curiosity, and sometimes questions that the aliens struggled to comprehend. It was like learning a new form of thought, entirely different from anything they had known. During this process, both sides learned patience. The visitors, though immensely powerful, did not rush. They observed the aliens' efforts, waiting for accurate and deliberate communication before responding. The aliens, in turn, had to suppress fear and focus on clarity and precision. The experience forced them to reconsider everything they had assumed about intelligence and diplomacy. Here was a species that did not communicate in words or images, yet their thoughts and intentions were complex, nuanced, and deliberate. The realization was both humbling and exhilarating. As the days passed, trust slowly began to develop. The visitors allowed small teams of aliens to approach their ships under controlled conditions. Scientists and diplomats stepped cautiously onto platforms near the landing zones, observing the visitors closely. The Deathworlders did not act aggressively. Instead, they continued their methodical study, showing interest in the alien structures, technology, and even the people themselves. It became clear that these beings were not here to conquer, but to understand, to observe, and perhaps to test the abilities of the Leoran civilization. By the end of the first week of contact, the aliens had made their first tentative breakthroughs in communication. Simple concepts like peace, observation, and curiosity could be exchanged using energy pulses and patterns. This was a monumental achievement for the civilization of Leora. The citizens celebrated quietly, aware that history was being made. They realized that their world had changed forever, not through conflict or destruction, but through the presence of beings so different, yet so capable of meaningful interaction. The first contact left a lasting impression on the planet. It was clear that the visitors were extraordinary, perhaps legendary Deathworlders, but they were not enemies. They challenged the aliens' understanding of intelligence, diplomacy, and life itself. Every person on Leora, from children to elders, sensed that they were part of something far greater than themselves. The arrival of these beings had brought fear, excitement, and awe, and had forced the civilization to confront its limitations and assumptions. The planet was no longer the same calm, predictable world it had been. It was a world standing at the threshold of a new chapter, one filled with discovery, adaptation, and the promise of understanding something far beyond its previous reach. The presence of the Deathworlders on Leora began to change everything. The aliens watched with astonishment as the visitors demonstrated abilities far beyond their understanding. They adapted to environments that even the most advanced Leoran technology could not manipulate. They moved effortlessly across rough terrain, endured conditions that would have harmed the strongest alien explorers, and performed tasks with precision and speed that defied logic. The scientists and leaders realized that their entire civilization, built on technology and careful planning, had relied too much on comfort and predictability. The visitors' raw strength and adaptability highlighted weaknesses the Leorans had never imagined. The Deathworlders did not teach directly or speak in any conventional sense. Instead, they demonstrated through action. When crossing a rocky valley, they showed how to conserve energy while moving quickly, adjusting their balance to the terrain in ways the aliens had never considered. When examining structures, they revealed simple techniques to reinforce strength and stability without relying on complex machines. The aliens began to notice patterns in their behavior, lessons embedded in every movement. It became clear that these beings were offering guidance, forcing the Leorans to learn by observation, trial, and adaptation. Tension arose among the citizens as the changes became evident. Some embraced the lessons, trying to match the visitors' resilience and adopting new ways of thinking. Scientists experimented with energy manipulation, engineers redesigned equipment, and soldiers trained to develop endurance and adaptability. Others resisted, afraid that the visitors' influence would disrupt the calm order of their lives. They worried that following the Deathworlder's methods might lead to chaos, injury, or failure. Families debated at home, communities argued in public squares, and schools encouraged discussions about the value of adaptation versus tradition. The society was split between curiosity and caution, excitement and fear. Even as tensions grew, fascination remained. Artists and writers recorded everything, sketching the visitors, noting their movements, and imagining stories of heroism and exploration. Children watched from safe distances, eager to mimic simple gestures, to learn the basics of survival and observation. Historians reflected on their own myths, realizing that the legendary Deathworlders might not be mere stories, but real beings whose presence could shape the future of the planet. Every citizen, whether they were scientists, laborers, or students, felt the impact. The planet's culture was changing in subtle and profound ways. As the weeks passed, the aliens' abilities began to grow. Engineers discovered that their structures could be strengthened using lessons inspired by the visitors' movements. Soldiers became faster, stronger, and more adaptable, able to navigate terrain and situations that had once seemed impossible. Children learned new ways of thinking, solving problems creatively and observing the environment carefully. The society began to appreciate resilience, flexibility, and observation as much as intelligence and technology. The presence of the Deathworlders was forcing a revolution, not in politics or governance, but in the very way the aliens thought, moved, and lived. The Deathworlders remained calm throughout, never asserting dominance, never showing aggression. Their methods were subtle, requiring the aliens to think, observe, and act for themselves. This created an unusual sense of responsibility among the citizens. The people realized that learning from the visitors required effort, discipline, and focus. It was not something that could be taught in classrooms or learned from books. It had to be experienced, understood, and applied. Slowly, the society became more resilient, more aware of its environment, and more capable of adapting to unforeseen challenges. The alien leaders took note of the transformations. They began integrating lessons from the visitors into their long-term plans. Education changed, with more emphasis on observation, adaptability, and self-reliance. Technology was redesigned to be more robust and flexible, complementing rather than replacing the abilities of the people. Even the government adjusted its strategies, preparing for situations where careful thought alone would not be enough. The arrival of the Deathworlders had taught Leora that survival required more than intelligence. It required endurance, adaptability, and courage. By the time the Deathworlders began to prepare for departure, Leora was transformed. Citizens moved with confidence, aware of their own strengths and limitations. Scientists and engineers had gained new perspectives on energy, materials, and structures. Soldiers and explorers had developed skills that made them capable of handling challenges that once seemed insurmountable. The society as a whole had learned to value resilience, observation, and flexibility, alongside the intelligence and planning that had always been central to life on Leora. The presence of the Deathworlders had left an indelible mark, reshaping not only the abilities of the people, but also the culture, priorities, and understanding of what it meant to survive and thrive. When the ships finally departed, they left without ceremony. There were no goodbyes, no speeches, no promises of return. The citizens of Leora watched the shadows rise, then vanish into the distance, leaving the planet silent once again. For a moment, it felt as though the world had returned to the calm predictability of the past. But everyone knew that nothing would ever be the same. The lessons, experiences, and transformations were permanent. Leora had faced the unknown, learned from it, and emerged stronger and wiser. The Deathworlders had come and gone, but their influence would echo through generations, shaping the civilization in ways that could never be undone. In the weeks and months that followed, Leora's people reflected on the experience. Children told stories about the visitors, imitating their movements and remembering the lessons of observation and resilience. Scholars recorded every detail, analyzing what had been learned and preparing manuals for future generations. Families discussed what they had seen, teaching younger members the importance of flexibility, courage, and awareness. The entire planet had grown not through conquest or conflict, but through exposure to a force that demanded growth, effort, and understanding. The experience changed the citizens' view of the galaxy. They realized that it was vast, unpredictable, and full of beings far different from themselves. Leora had once believed that intelligence and technology were enough to ensure safety and success. Now, they understood that survival required adaptation, observation, and resilience. The Deathworlders had shown them a different perspective, one that combined strength, intelligence, and awareness in ways the aliens had never imagined. The legacy of the visit would guide the civilization for generations, inspiring them to explore, learn, and grow while respecting the power and mystery of the galaxy around them. The planet, once calm and orderly, had become a place of possibility and preparedness. Citizens were more confident, curious, and capable. The children who had watched from rooftops and streets had grown into young adults with new skills and understanding. Leaders, scholars, and everyday citizens alike were better equipped to handle uncertainty. Leora had faced the unknown, adapted, and thrived. The arrival of the Deathworlders had not brought destruction or conquest, but transformation, leaving a civilization stronger, wiser, and ready for whatever challenges the galaxy might send next. The visitors had gone, but the impact of their presence lingered in every corner of Leora. The citizens felt a new sense of possibility and responsibility. They had learned that survival was not only about intelligence or technology, but also about resilience, observation, and adaptability. The lessons of the Deathworlders had changed how they approached life, work, and community. They moved with purpose, aware that every decision, every movement, and every observation mattered. The planet itself seemed alive with energy and potential, reflecting the growth of its people. In schools, children practiced exercises designed to enhance awareness and adaptability. They ran obstacle courses that simulated difficult terrain, learned observation skills to detect subtle changes in their environment, and solved problems without relying solely on technology. The teachers explained that these lessons were inspired by beings from beyond the galaxy, who had shown them how to survive and thrive in challenging conditions. The children embraced the challenges eagerly, fascinated by the idea that beings from distant worlds had helped them grow stronger. The scientists continued their studies, now using techniques inspired by the visitors' methods. They experimented with materials, energy manipulation, and structures that could adapt to changes in the environment. Their discoveries advanced the technology of Leora far beyond what had been possible before. Engineers incorporated flexibility and resilience into every design, from buildings to transportation systems. Soldiers and explorers trained constantly, learning to endure harsh conditions, adapt quickly, and make decisions under pressure. The entire civilization had been reshaped, prepared not only for routine life but also for the unexpected challenges of the galaxy. Families and communities also embraced the lessons of the Deathworlders. They practiced cooperation, observation, and resilience in daily life. They prepared for natural events, emergencies, and unpredictable changes in their environment. These practices were not born of fear, but of awareness and responsibility. People understood that life was unpredictable, and preparation, adaptability, and courage were the keys to thriving. The planet's culture had shifted from relying solely on technology and order to valuing resilience, awareness, and self-reliance. Leaders and scholars documented every aspect of the visitors' influence. They recorded the methods, observations, and techniques of the Deathworlders, ensuring that future generations would benefit from their lessons. Libraries, learning centers, and training facilities incorporated these teachings into their programs. Stories were told and retold, not as myths, but as records of a real encounter that had transformed the planet. Every citizen, young or old, understood that the galaxy was vast and full of beings who could challenge, inspire, and teach them in ways they had never imagined. The departure of the Deathworlders marked the beginning of a new era for Leora. The planet had faced the unknown, adapted and emerged stronger. The citizens moved forward with confidence, curiosity, and respect for the vast galaxy around them. Their civilization had been tested, challenged, and transformed, and they were ready to face whatever the future might bring. The story of the Eye, visitors once mysterious and intimidating, had become a source of inspiration and growth. Leora would never be the same, and its people knew that they were now prepared for anything that the galaxy might send their way. The planet thrived, its citizens empowered by lessons learned from beings far beyond their understanding. Leora had discovered that true strength was not only intelligence or technology, but also resilience, observation, and adaptability. The legacy of the Deathworlders would guide them for generations, shaping a civilization capable of facing uncertainty. With courage, creativity, and wisdom, the galaxy was vast, full of mysteries, and the people of Leora were ready to explore, learn, and grow with every challenge that lay ahead.